Magic reveals itself to those who remember where to look for it. This is Magic Hour, and I'm your host, Taylor Page. Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm your producer, Claire. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
So we are absolutely buzzing right now after our interview with Lisa Lister, and I'm so excited to introduce her and get into the talk. Like, seriously, so excited. So I'm going to keep this intro brief, but there is something that has been on my mind that I felt really called to share. And if you're a regular listener of Magic Hour, you'll know that my guides are so courteous that they give me messages throughout the week that they want me to share on the podcast, because they know sometimes we shoot the podcast in between my client sessions or other things. So they help me stay in the lines. And that's actually something you can ask your guides for, is to help you do things on time. That was a big shakeup for me when I realized that, because a lot of times my angel readings will go over and our things will run late, and you can literally ask your angels and guides, please help this go on time. Please give me the messages in a prompt manner. And they will listen, and it's actually really cool how things can work out that way. But aside from the point, there was something going on last night that made me want to share with the collective, which is sometimes, and this isn't exclusive to right before bed, but I think right before bed is maybe the most common time this can happen, where our thoughts start racing and we toss and we turn and we have a hard time sleeping and getting to sleep. But it can also happen during our day when we can't focus, we can't concentrate, we feel anxious, things are running in our mind. But I want to focus mostly on, right before bed, but the same concepts are applicable to whenever this is happening for you and you can't stop your mind from racing. So I'm going to speak from personal experience. After my mom passed, going through a lot of things that I've gone through, I had to stay productive to stay alive. And I couldn't just, I took a month and a half off from readings, maybe 2 months. I can't honestly remember because this was 3 years ago, but I took some time off. I cried all the tears. I felt my way through. But sometimes we're not able to take more than that. And I was very fortunate that I was able. And so sometimes we go through things that are really hurtful and really painful, and it's really hard to find the time to actually process them. And so this can be from childhood up until present day, things that we've gone through and not having the time, the toolbox, the sacred space to process it. And so if you find yourself in a constant routine of your mind buzzing at night, that is often the time where we finally stop. And our body has a second to talk to us, and our consciousness starts to open up to the things that during the day we distract, avoid, numb, or stay productive over. And so if your mind is buzzing at night, and it's funny because this was actually coming up in an angel reading that I did for a podcast listener who's so lovely. And if you listen to this, you know who you are because we talked about this, where at night, it is the time where our inner child is trying to get our attention because we are not listening to them at other times. Most of us are not listening to them at other times. And so our inner child is a really important form of a spirit guide for us because they connect us to our humanity and our authenticity and our true essence. And it's the part of us that came in wide awake and remembers who we are. And so my inner child would be like, why aren't you crying with me? I need you to cry with me. This is very sad. I feel like my reality, my truth isn't being, seen or heard or recognized at all. Or I don't want to be hurt the same way I've been hurt before. So I'm going to list all the things I'm mad about and replay it and just be in that anger. And so what was coming up with what this client's angel said in the message about this was, before bed, if you find your thoughts racing, to take 20 minutes and just ask your inner child what they want you to know right now and just free write stream of consciousness style and just let it all out so that it doesn't have to come when you're finally trying to get some sleep. And you can do this during the day too. And you can also ask yourself, what does my heart want me to know? And so that's one layer of it, is the inner child stuff. The second layer is how often do we really listen to ourselves? I find that we often are saying, well, I should be feeling this. And we start to talk over or play judge and jury in our head over the truth of our experience. Well, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Or, oh, I don't really have the right to think this, or whatever it is. And that's the other reason that everything comes up right before we go to sleep, or we feel this low grade anxiety. That's not a failure. It's a message. It's showing you that there is something that is either on your heart that needs to be heard, your inner child needs to be heard, there's chords of connection that need to be heard. And so last night I was tossing and turning in bed. My mind was racing. I was like ready to go to bed super early so we could do this interview. And then I ended up tossing and turning. And I just didn't resist. Instead, I was like, okay, I'm here to listen, because so often we can be like, I'm not listening, I'm not listening, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to sleep, and it makes it louder. And so there's something here about just not resisting, listening, and that's the fastest path through. And so I was like, okay, I'm listening. And it was my inner child, and it was my heart, and they both had different messages for me. And they were replaying anger, and they were replaying, I'm so right because this is my narrative and this is what this person has done to me and this is how I should feel about it. And instead of me being like, let's think about something else, let's put on sleep music, let's say a mantra, I just listened. And I recognized that these voices of my psyche were not me. They were guests at the cocktail party, but they were not me. And I listened, I heard them out because they were scared that I was going to be hurt the same way that I always would be, that historically I had in this dynamic with this person that they were talking about. And I tuned in, and instead of trying to ignore, I dove deeper and I said, what's the message here, angels? What do you want from me? What can help me move through this? Like, I'm listening. Help me get the message. Help me understand how to not avoid or numb or deny. What do you want me to know? And the word was forgiveness. And they were like, to set yourself free, to cut cords with the power that the anger, the resentment, the retelling the story of the narrative for yourself, to like, you know, be stewing in your righteousness of how right you are and how wrong they are. That's not serving you. It's keeping you up at night. It's distracting you from your marriage, your job, your clients, your responsibilities. And what we want you to recognize now is that the highest path forward is finding forgiveness in your heart for your sake. And that has nothing to do with this other person. They don't even need to be a part of that. It's to do with us for our own sake. And so that was just my message. And who knows what your message is on your heart, that your guides, your angels, your body, your inner child are all trying to direct your consciousness to in the brief moments that we have nothing planned except to try to go to sleep. And so if you find that you have these empty spaces in your day where discomfort comes, and it's so tempting to look at our phone, turn on the news, call a friend, whatever it is, and trust me, I've been there, I really recommend to just dive head first into it. And if you aren't in the practice of speaking directly with your inner child or your heart or your angels with your guides, do that journal exercise, and it will help prime you to start to learn their language more so that you can be in instant connection. But even if you open that space with a question and just feel and stay open and receive, it might surprise you what comes through. I know the first time I heard from my inner child, it really surprised me. And the other thing I like to do is, even in moments before sleep, if my thoughts aren't racing, just being like, all good, inner child, all good, heart space, like I tune into everybody else's energy all the time, that sometimes I can forget to tune into my own. And doing just an energetic scan before bed, seeing where we're holding tension, telling our inner child that she's a badass and we love her and we see her even if no one else can. That is like the most healing thing you can do right before you go to sleep. So I invite you, if you have that dynamic of a racing thought mind, instead of trying to circumvent it or program it or see it as some sort of spiritual failure, instead get the message at the core of it. Because when we avoid the message, it has to yell at us to come through, and it won't go away. And then we start to take medicine, and then we take sleeping pills. And it's like we fight back so hard, but really all we have to do is listen.
Yes, I love that. I think you've spoke about this before, but all of those things are messengers. Even the deep pain and sadness we feel is a messenger. We are feeling that discomfort because we need to listen to something and move through something. And when we're just like, no, I don't want to feel this, or stop thinking about that, I think we're kind of avoiding it, and then it just has to find another way to reach us. And I just loved what you said too about the forgiveness, because a close friend of mine often talks about this. When we hang on to those feelings of resentment and anger, I mean, when we feel them, we can use them as a messenger for healing. But then when we hang on to them, we're just drinking poison ourselves. And the other person is not necessarily, they don't even know maybe that we feel this way. They're not in that exchange with us. So we are literally just poisoning ourselves with that resentment and anger. And the forgiveness is for us. That other person maybe won't even know about your forgiveness, but you give that gift to yourself so that you don't have to carry that with you any longer.
I could not agree more. It is so important for ourselves, and drinking poison is exactly what it feels like. And it's that part of ourselves that like twists in the knife and is like replaying the details and re-stimulating ourselves with all the ways they're wrong and we're right. And at a certain point, that's no longer the message. That's co-creating with pain. And so when you find that, it's like, okay, on one end, we need those details so that we can understand why we're angry and not allow ourselves to be walked on. But then after a certain point of replaying, it's like, okay, we know, we don't need that anymore. And that brings me back to something I love so much in Women Who Run with the Wolves is this story she tells, Dr. Pinkola Estes. She tells this story about how there's this tribe, and in the tribe, if something bad happens to you, you are allowed to tell your story 3 times. You're allowed to tell your story 3 times, and everyone will grieve with you, cry with you, rage with you, hold you. And after that 3rd time, you're not allowed to tell it anymore, because then you're starting to let it become a part of you instead of just something you experienced and moved through. It's starting to affect your story of self, and that's when it's no longer helpful. And I found that so deeply resonant when I read the book.
Yes, that's so powerful.
Yeah. So speaking of powerful women, life-changing women, I want to introduce our guest this week because I'm absolutely buzzing to get into the interview that we have with her. So, crowned the Defender of Female Awesomeness by Cooler Magazine, Lisa Lister offers support, space, remembrance, spiritual guidance, cyclical maps, and counsel to women who are exploring, navigating, and wanting to heal their relationship with their body, power, sex, creativity, pleasure, passion, remembrance, who want to reclaim their magic in these interesting times. She provides tools, knowledge, and practices to help you feel safe, to reconnect with and be present in your body, to understand your cyclical nature, and work with your rhythmic intelligence to thrive. Lisa works with the cosmos and her stories to understand and map the terrain of the landscape we're navigating on Earth and in our body. As above, so below. She grows herbs and makes teas and tinctures, plays drums and tambourines. She dances, she moves her body to heal. She supports, she journeys, she visions, and she celebrates. Welcome to the absolutely magical Lisa Lister. Lisa Lister, we are so excited to have you on Magic Hour podcast today. You are truly a dream guest for us. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting. Thank you.
Absolutely. I just have to say to the audience, I got your book, Witch, in 2017. That was the first year that I started charging money for my angel readings. And that was the year Angels and Amethyst was born. And your book was just a full body resonance, and there are codes of wisdom in this book that just ignited things deep in my womb space, and I am forever grateful for you.
Aw, thank Thank you. Received with all of the love. But honestly, we do this, don't we? You're doing what you're doing, I do what I do, simply just to keep reflecting and encouraging and inspiring and supporting each other to do this work in the world. So yeah, but I'm receiving. Look at me receiving. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so we always ask our guests, what are your big three? That's the first question we usually ask.
And when you say big three, do you mean my astrological big three?
Yes, sun, moon, and rising.
I am a Scorpio. There's a ton of Scorpio in my chart, and I think you're a Scorpio too, right? But it makes me super secretive. Like, I really believe that those three things are part of like my blueprint, like, or pink print, or whatever you want to call it, for my living, right? So I'm super secretive about those things, but do know that, yeah, a lot of Scorpio, and my Venus is also in Scorpio, and I feel like that's one that we all need to be looking at, as well as our big three. Like, we know the big three, but when you also know the Venus placement, that's when it gets really juicy. So I'm just heading that up.
I could not agree more about the Venus placement, and I want to go into that with you in a little bit because there's so much to say about that. And I totally get that. Our big three and our birth chart, it is a blueprint and it is sacred information. So I totally respect that. And as a Scorpio sun myself, hearing that you're a Scorpio is really, period. That's all I have to hear.
Don't think that I won't ask every single other person what their big three is as well, because I am also very nosy. So there's that too.
Yes, that is our lot in life as Scorpios, is to be the healer for everyone else, but then have a really hard time sharing our things and, sharing our deepest, darkest secrets. And so the second question that I like to ask is, how does your intuition show up for you?
My intuition is felt. Right, so it's a felt experience. So some people see and experience it in that way. For me, it's a felt gut feeling, and it's a trust. It's a total trusted knowing in something. So if something is off, whether it's and that can be like a smell. And what I mean by that is not like, oh, the milk smells off, although it might, right? But it's more about a sensorial feeling like, this is not okay, this is not right. And it shows up through my body. Like, so if my body is not on board, then we're not doing it. That's how my intuition works. It's deep, and it's a trust in the felt, because our head's got like a lot of chat. And so sometimes we can think that when our head's going like, no, that's not a good idea, Lisa, you think, oh, is that my intuition? No, like for me, it's very much like, actually, when I'm in my body and I'm feeling into it and I'm like, what's this about? And it's like, no, that's not okay. Or, yes, this is an absolute yes, but your head's going, no, it's not. That makes no sense. Yep, then we're going to go ahead. But it's a felt sense. It's a much more primordial knowing than our head, which is based on information and stuff that we've taken on board, which may or may not be ours, stories we've been told, which may or not be ours. And that's how I differentiate between what feels like, because sometimes people ask, like, what's the difference between like what the voices, and some people may experience intuition as a voice. I get that, but you'll know the difference, because that voice will be for me, will be from within, versus a very heady kind of, oh, that's what somebody said, or that's what somebody thinks, versus, oh, that's what I know.
Yes, I love that. And I relate to that so much. And I always say that it's a good sign if you're a little surprised by what your intuition says, because that shows that it's not your mind coming in and filling in the blank based off of insecurity, past wounding, past trauma. It's actually surprising you, which means it's coming from an outside source, or a source that we're not in regular communion with in ourselves. And so it sounds like you're highly clairsentient, which is my highest clair as well, which is just that psychic feeling in your physical body. And I always tell the listeners, ask your body what a yes feels like. Ask your body what a no feels like, because in self-divination, which is the most difficult form because we want things so much, our body is just a surefire tool to use in the micro moments to know what is for us and what isn't. So I love that answer so much. So something that you speak about a lot, which I appreciate so much, is the womb space, and you talk about it as this cauldron and this connection to what you call she, which is just this divine feminine pulsing energy that is this power within us and throughout the natural world that's so stunningly beautiful to think about. And so I'm wondering if you could speak more to this idea as our womb space, as our cauldron, as a portal of connection, and how we can feel more connected to that if we feel disconnected from our body.
All of my favorite things. So yeah, I think for me, I talk about it as I talk about the whole cauldron, right? So that's our whole hip space, this whole place in which holds our womb space, right? So it's this cauldron of creativity, of possibility. And in that, connecting with our womb is just such a gorgeous remembering, right? Like it's about us remembering, and it holds so much wisdom and wiseness and medicine and magic. And it's about remembering through that as a portal of possibility who we are as women. Now, you don't have to have one in order for you to experience magic and all of those things that I just said, right? But if you do have one, let's honor that. Let's honor it. Let's love on it, and let's recognize it for the power that it is. And that's what why I share the fact that when we connect in and come in through our body, come down past the heart, past the belly, come into our womb space, we can remember a lot more about who we are. And we can trust ourselves a lot more, because we know we're talking about she power. She power is this, and when I say she, I'm not meaning it in the like necessarily the gender sense. It kind of moves past that. It's bigger than that. It's simply my term for feminine frequency, for for us remembering this deep, gorgeous, yummy feminine feeling that we have not been taught about, that we've not, and that's what I mean by remembering, because I don't want us to think we have to have more things to do, right? I don't want us to think we have to learn new things, have a 5-point plan, figure this out, do that. No, we come in so we remember. Like, and then when we come down and we come into that cauldron, it's like, oh, that's who I am. And it will be different for each and every one of us, right? Which is why for me, there is no way in which to do it. And we are so disconnected from it because they don't want us to remember. They don't want us to remember how powerful we are when we are connected to it. Because when we are connected to it, we have this connectivity to power. And when I'm talking about power, I'm not talking about like 80s kind of shoulder pads, big lip, big blue eyebrows. I'm talking about the power that comes from knowing who you are, you and you and you, all of us, each individually, so that when we come together collectively, we are powerful as a collective, right? And we're not because a lot of people think when we do the self work, when we do all of the self love and all of the words with self in it, basically, it means that we're disconnecting from collective. It's like, no, when we know who we are, when we're rooted, and we become much more rooted when we can come into our womb space, when we trust ourselves here. And like I say, it's not an easy task because we have been disconnected. We've been taught very cleverly to be scared of our power, to not revere it in the way that it should be revered. So instead, like they've taught us really clever. It's very clever social kind of spell work to teach us to be afraid of our power. They put it in the dark. They've taught us to be afraid of the dark. So therefore, we're afraid of our power. And then, wait up. Actually, if we connect with that, if we remember, if we get really cool with actually being in the dark, because we now know that that's where our roots grow strongest. Oh, we're now able to show up. We're now able to rise with power because we know who we are. And we remember, and then we remember lots of things, not just what it is to be connected to our body, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But you do, like what we're talking about with that gut feeling, we trust ourselves. We are able to show up and not abandon ourselves. And that's for so many of us. We've been taught, again, really successfully to please and appease others at the detriment of ourselves, at the detriment of what it is we're here to feel, experience and live. And so the connectivity from the womb space up, as opposed to like, oh, we'll just do all the head work We'll just collect the information. We'll just know what we're told. When we can skip that, when we can override that, when we can respell that through our remembering, through our body, that's when I feel like the real magic and power can come alive in us. We can then activate a different way of being in the world.
Yes, I so agree. And there's two different points on what you just said that I want to touch on. One is that power in the darkness. And I could not agree more. And I always say that the shadow truly is where the magic lies. And I feel like, so I talk a lot about what I call patriarchal PR. And I feel like darkness is one of those things. But if we can shift to a more she power perspective of darkness, it's the womb. It's fertile ground for us to grow in. It's the unknown that's ready to be filled with our creations. And so I think darkness on so many different levels has been demonized, and even the roots of like dark magic are rooted in racism. And so I think that there's so many layers that the dark has been demonized and mislabeled and patriarchal PR'd, and it's so true. We have to, I always say the best psychic mediums are the ones most comfortable in the unknown, and that feeling of navigating the unknown, the darkness, the in-between in that womb-like state is so important. And so I think that that's so beautiful what you spoke to. And the other thing that really stuck out to me was this feeling of remembrance being held in the womb space, because I learned this fact and it blew my mind that a woman comes in with all of her eggs already. So like we were in our grandmother's womb as an egg, and our future grandkids are in our womb right now as an egg. So that is just so amazing, the codes of creation that live in our womb space. And also I was like so upset. So every other day I get upset about how the Library of Alexandria was burned down and we lost all the knowledge. Like every other day I like get upset about that. And I got this message from my guides that said, all of that knowledge lives within your womb. And it blew me away because it's so true. Like our ancestors that would have known that knowledge passed everything down to us. So it's not just the pain and trauma we've inherited from our ancestors, but it's also the spiritual knowing, the remembrance, the gifts. And I feel like our sacral chakra, whether you have a womb or not, is such a place where those seeds of creation and wisdom are held. So I loved how you spoke about the remembrance aspect of that.
I was very much disconnected from that space for so much of my kind of early 20s, that actually that reconnection is how I remembered. And for me, it's what happens when we come in and come down and come into that cauldron of possibility, come down into our womb space, we remember. And remembering is what they don't want us to do. They don't want us to remember because it's here where our power resides. It's here in the darkness of this cosmic womb space, like our womb, but it's also a replication of the cosmic womb, this dark, yummy place of possibility. So it's a place of no thing, but it's where everything and anything is possible, right? And for me, it's like, this is where the goodness is. Now, a lot of us find it very difficult to connect with that space because of many, many reasons, whether that's stories, whether that's trauma, whether that's, when I say stories, it's stories we've been told, or whether it's experiences, whether it's things we've held on to too tightly. It's whether it's for many, many reasons, right? And those reasons are usually told to us, right? They're spoken over, like they speak our story to us. We're told how to feel and want to experience that space, when actually, when we reconnect with it, it can be glorious. It can be so glorious. It can be delicious. It can be nourishing. And for me, it's been that nourishment that was necessary for me as a woman, as a human, to reconnect with that space, to remember this she power. And when I talk about she power, I'm talking about it as divine, primordial, feminine wisdom that's held to me in that space, but is also a reflection of the divine, feminine, primordial wisdom that's held in Mama Earth, right? So it's, and we know that that's been pushed down, that's been pushed underground into the dark.
And so, but actually, the darkness is where we grow our strongest roots. So they've done a really good job in putting our power in the dark and then teaching us to be scared of the dark. What we're now doing by reconnecting with our womb space, by reconnecting with our bodies, we're remembering. And we call that power up and through. Like, so that she power is the power that's in the earth. We pull it up and through us into our womb space. And then that's the power we can then nourish and nurture and source ourselves with, so that we can then be of bigger service to the world, because we're full up. We're full up with our source power. That she power is source power.
That's so beautiful. And as you speak, I'm just like trying to contain myself because something about you as a speaker, as an author, it just like resonates with me on such a deep level. I'm about to like throw my chair.
I love that. I want our temple back. Like, I really want that temple space back, right? It's like what you say about we mourn for and it's known, like we know that Alexandria held some really beautiful big magic for us, and so then now in the Venus book that's coming out in September, I speak to our body as a mystery school. So what you've experienced regarding those feelings as codes, it's like we're all remembering different parts. We all hold like really important codes, and we've got to allow ourselves to be the mystery school, not keep looking outside ourselves for these answers. It's like they're all here. Now, that's also a very easy way to say to somebody, oh yeah, the answers are within. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that. Like, yes, I know. And how, what, how? Trust. And that really does come from just the breathing, connecting, leaning back into our ancestral wisdom, literally, figuratively, that vagus nerve, letting ourselves really touch into ancestral wisdom that runs all the way down the back and into our roots, right? And so it's then we remember. And then we can remember that we are that mystery school, that we hold all of it. And so I love that we're all receiving very similar messages in very different ways, so that we all hear it, so it all lands. So like no one's got like all of the answers, but that we've got the answer for us in that moment. And then if we share it in the way that you're doing with this beautiful piece of art, the way that I do with my art and my work and my words, the way each person is finding a different way to weave that wisdom. And it's wisdom, it's the difference. It's wisdom versus the information, right? We're bombarded with information. We can get all the information we want. But remember, that information is usually created in a way in which someone wants us to respond and react to. Whereas wisdom, when it's felt, like what you were saying about hearing me speak, what I hear when I hear you speak, it's like we recognize something, and that's a wisdom. That's a different feeling. It's a reflective, it's a felt sense versus, oh, I must react, I must do, I must be better, I must serve, I must do this. It's like, oh no, it's a knowing. And that's how we know the difference. That's how we know the difference between like intuition and what we're told. And it's how we know what's felt versus what we should be doing.
I could not agree more. And I always say that resonance is one of our most powerful tools in our toolbox. So when I hear you speaking and I'm getting this full body resonance, that's that little extra something, something that comes with wisdom and spirit speaking through us. And I always say that full heart resonance is how you know a message is for you. So if your mind is kind of like, I should be taking this message, or I'm scared that if I don't listen to this message, something bad will happen or I won't be my highest self, that's not really a message for you. That's doing something to your ego or your shadows. But those messages that just land on your heart as a full knowing, it plays perfectly into, and you're right, we are on slightly different radio frequencies, playing spirit's music through different styles, but together it plays this bigger symphony. And you gave me a puzzle piece just now, and I can't wait to read your Venus book about how our body is the mystery school. And that goes hand in hand with that sense of full body knowing and resonance. What's it resonating with? The part of us that remembers, the part of us that is in our highest self, the part of us that remembers that we are pure source. And so that resonance in a heart way speaks to the fact that every single one of us carries wisdom in our body, that our resonance is giving little glimmers of recognition to.
Yes. I love it. And that's why for me, the Venus part, when I speak of Venus, it's because it's harmonics, right? It's not about finding balance. People get really caught up in that kind of Libran element of Venus and it being balanced. It's like, no, it's the harmonics that we find through frequency, through resonance, through felt, through the felt experience. And that's how we activate. So your story may activate someone else's, your thread may activate someone else's thread, and then we start to weave together, and then it becomes this beautiful, like you say, symphonic kind of tapestry of felt sensual kind of sensorial yumminess, which is what we all should be like calling in, because yes, there is a horror show happening in the world, and that's one reality. And there's the reality that we get to create because we are the creatrixes. We are able to, when we do remember ourselves as source, when we do remember the capacity we have to create, that we do get to create something different alongside that. Like, so we're not pretending that's not happening. We're very, very awake to and aware of. And because of that, we're then able to activate our own creativity from that kind of dark, unknown space where everything and anything is possible, a different reality and a different harmonics that is in the frequency of love, that is in our frequency, which is the one that we're weaving together. And we don't need to know what that outcome is. It's not a very linear, right, okay, set the goal, do the thing, this is how it's going to be, which is the kind of patriarchal kind of overculture that we've been having to navigate and work within, and clearly is not set up to serve us. Instead, we're now, through our cyclical remembering, through our wisdom of known ancient like lineages, whether that's more the spiritual lineage, whether that's our own personal lineages, both future, ancient, all of the things at the same time, we're then able to create something very different. And that's where, for me, I get excited, because that's where the hope is. And we've got to hold on to that more than anything right now.
Yes, I love that. And it reminds me of a message that I got that basically said there will be no power to the people if the people are not in their power. And
Right.
so this work is so important. It's not enough to just shout into a void about the injustices in the world. We all feel it. We all feel the rage. We all see it. We have to be in our power on an individual level as well as a macro level, or else we'll continue to be pushed around and fear-based tactics will work on us. And so this reclamation of our womb space, plunging headfirst into the darkness without fear, is not only not ignoring the problem, it's a solution and necessary prerequisite to birthing a new world.
Agreed. And I also think there's a little bit you said, which I love, which is also about we plunge head first without fear. We might plunge with fear as well, right? And I think it's also really okay to just go, do you know what? There is fear, and recognizing that actually, if there is, you better believe that's where there's the power. You better believe that anywhere you've taught to be fearful of is where power resides. So actually, we better go there. We better go there. We better show up to that space. We better shine all the lights on it and bring our light to that dark space and be like, right, okay, come on, power, where are we at? And meet each other, let the fear be there, let it. And it's not like feel the fear and do it anyway. That's not what I'm saying. It's like we meet the fear, we know it, we get to know it, we assess it, because we know that's power. Because we know actually that is our power.
Yes. And this is what happens when two Scorpios start talking. We inevitably are like, power, darkness, power. But
no small talk.
Yeah, there's no small talk. In fact, I'm allergic to small talk.
Me too.
Yeah, let's get in here and talk about the womb space and remembering ancient codes and power. But no, it's so true. And that's why I try to reframe self-doubt and fear as actually a good thing, because it shows that you're breaking out of a comfort zone. It shows that you're breaking out of a uncomfortable comfort zone. And in the words of the amazing medium Val Williams, she has a whole book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Because when we feel the fear and do it anyway, we're retraining our nervous system that we're safe to take up more space, that we're safe to be powerful, that we're safe to share our truth, that we're safe to show up as our most authentic, bright self. And so I absolutely love what you said. I want to transition now because you've brought up your Venus book. And I saw you announce this on Instagram, and I couldn't be more excited because I'm an astrologer myself. And I saw in your description of the book that you included sexuality. And I sat with that for a moment because traditionally sexuality has been attributed to Mars. But then I sat with it a little longer and I was like, you know what? It is about freaking time that a woman decided what Venus is about. Because I talk about finding divine feminine in the birth chart. And this is another area where patriarchy has infiltrated astrology, and ancient astrologers, if you look into them, are, men. And they've decided that the two placements in the birth chart, the two planets that are feminine, are the moon and Venus, the mother and the lover, who we are to men. And that's what I love about the archetype of the witch. It's because it's not about who we are to anyone else. It's about our own power, our own agency, our own desire, our own pleasure. And I'm so happy that a woman is in co-creation with She is writing about this topic, because Venus has been stripped away. I mean, both of these feminine aspects, like the messiness, the power, the urgency, the desire, the sexuality, has been attributed to all of the masculine planets. And so with Venus, it's like, yeah, there is sexuality, there is desire, there is primal nature with Venus. It's not just how we balance with others, how we take care of others, how we're so accommodating of others. It's like that good girl trope has been woven so much into astrology that the two feminine placements are like how we mother and how we take care of a partner. And so I'm so happy that you've gotten your hands on Venus and can tell a story that's more in connection with actual goddess energy and who she has been throughout history. So can you speak to this a little bit?
Well, I feel like you may have read it, because that's ultimately everything that you can think of. And the main key for me was in the story, right? So she has been told to us. Like, her story has been spoken to us, who she should be, how she should show up, like what she should look like, like what the goddess Venus represents. And it's like, we're going to rewrite a new story. And it was the same with witch, but it's the same with this, because actually this is the same energy, because this, and obviously, I mean, as an astrologer, you'll know, right? But Venus has, like, it's not as easy to map the cycle of Venus as it is maybe to map the cycle of the moon or our own menstrual cycles, for instance. And yet there is this beautiful harmony to her, which is about us recognizing through her cycle this totality of all of our parts, right? So she is this, so there is this beautiful, in this 19-month cycle that happens, there is this like descent, there's this stripping bare of everything that no longer serves us, and then we come into the underworld, and people don't associate Venus with the underworld, but this phase is for me is what's brought me back to life. It's where I've remembered who I am through this cycle, is how I now know that I am not any of those stories on the descent, the stories that I've been told about myself, how I should show up, like stories that have been told to me, like, Lisa, you should be more this. Oh, Lisa, if you're spiritual, you should look like this. You should do that. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't wear this. Yada, yada, yada. Into the darkness, into that unknown wound space, like we're talking about. And then we strip ourselves bare of everything. We are in the unknown with Ma of the dark matter. We are there. We are in her. She is in us. We recognize ourselves there because we are her. And then we're able to ascend. We're able to ascend rooted, knowing who we are there in that dark space. We ascend, and we can pick up any of those things. I like pretty stuff. I'm a big fan of pretty things. Like, I'm not saying don't have the pretty things. I love to accessorize, but we get to choose, right? And this is for me, Venus is very much about choice, and it's about resourcing ourselves. Like, she's all about resources. She's all about the money, yes, and she's also about us and our physical resources, our needs, our wants, our desires. And so we then ascend, and then we self-initiate in that retrograde phase, right? We get to put our own freaking crown on. No one crowns us. We crown ourselves there. We own our throne, and we make up the rules, because like I say, she's this mystery school, and she's unfolding, and she wants to unfold through us. And it's more of a revealment of who we then are as a totality, as a whole woman, not who we are like depending on like what that artist said at the time, what that person and that's why she's been so brilliant. There's not a culture that hasn't got her in it. And so some people get really cross that these little beautiful statues that have been found are called Venuses, because it's almost like a sexualization of this beautiful mother cult. And I get that, and I will always, anywhere there ever is an opportunity to, reclaim a word. Like, I freaking love the word Venus, and you're not going to dictate what that word means to me. I will write my Venus story. You will write your Venus story, and we will write a story of Venus, which is about being powerful, which is about being in our power, because we know the wholeness of who we are.
That's so beautiful. I love that so much, and said truly as a Venus in Scorpio. um, and my Venus is in the 8th house, so I have a little bit of that energy too. It's at 0 degrees of Sagittarius, so I just missed being Venus in Scorpio myself. But no, it's so true. And even as you were speaking, I was thinking about how our first nature as human beings was to be goddess worshipers and worshipers of the divine feminine. And then history came in, and even the myths of these Roman and Greek myths that the planets have taken their stories are very patriarchal in nature, of being this jealous gossip type of, it's like it's almost funny if you look back on it, how obviously patriarchal PR'd the role of women have been, and like goddesses have been in post goddess worship cultures. And so I love, nobody gets to decide what Venus means except us when we reach back into our cauldron of remembrance. The Venus codes live in us, no one else.
Yes. I cannot agree more. And I feel like that's what I feel, which is why when people were like, I can't believe you just, like, it's audacious to call this book Venus, like as if like I should have a different, I'm like, why? Like it's because actually it's bold. It's bold because she's calling us up to be bold. You know, it's coming out in a Venus in Leo cycle, right? And Venus in Leo is this courageous lioness. It's like calling us all up to be seen and heard. And for me, that was part of this. It's coming out when Venus is in the Scorpio part of the cycle, right? Like everything, I'm not, there's nothing by coincidence. We work with her, then things actualize in a really beautiful way. And that's what I mean about the harmonics. When we work with her, whether that's astrologically, but whether that's with her story or with her myths, like I say in the book, like I speak to the myths. I'm like, look, there's some really kind of patriarchy. There's some beautiful, like Inanna, like Ishtar, like there's some really beautiful myths. And I feel like Hathor, the goddess Hathor, holds like a very beautiful, like the Ma of civilization, key to our Venusian codes. And yet when we look at the kind of, she becomes what people want her to be, which is very interesting story about womanhood as well, right? Like, so she becomes who the culture need her to be. I like that because for me, it means she's a shapeshifter, right? She's able to be a chameleon and work with the energy so that she remains relevant, so that she remains part of the freaking story. And I think that's a reflection to us as women, to recognize actually we have to remain part of the story. And in order to do that, we create it. And so I feel like that's what she's been teaching us through history while we see her in art. And yes, some of that is the male gaze. Some of that is told through a male lens. And that's what I say in the book. Like, most of the stories about her have been told by dudes. We get to rewrite this next phase of Venus. We get to rewrite now what she means to us and what it means to us to be her and experience her and live her. And for me, like, which was the why? Like, we're like, right, okay, this is what's happening, people. This is like, let's assemble, let's get together, let's figure this out, right? Then self-sorcery is the way, which is this remembering, which is returning, it's reclaiming, it's revering ourselves as divine. as ceremony, our experience as ceremony. And then this Venus is the lived experience. It's how we now get to really, really live fully, whole, the whole of who we are, the whole experience, the expansion, the capacity, as opposed to who we're told and how we're told to live and be.
Yes, I love that. And I just want to say too, kind of like you said with I like shiny, pretty things too. That's perfect. And if you identify with the moon and Venus of being this caretaker and you feel those energies, that's beautiful too. What I'm saying is that there's not just one way to show up, and the other parts of womanhood has been so sanitized out of the story. So we can show up however we want, and that should be reflected in our mythology, and it has been before it was purposely erased. I also want to say too that you were talking about the cycle of Venus, and I looked into this one time about the pattern and sacred geometry that Venus makes as it makes a rotation, and it looks like a flower. It like
Yeah,
looks
so
like
it's
this.
a wild rose.
Yes.
But it's a wild rose, and so technically
Yes.
it also makes a pentagram, right? So
Yes.
it's a five-petaled flower, a five-pointed star. Everything about her is just this
Yes.
gorgeous harmony of
Yes.
numbers, and it's the Fibonacci sequence. Like her cycle becomes this, and it's like, oh yeah, yeah. It's just, and the more I dived in, the more I was able to like. This makes so much, it just lands on your heart, and you just turn into like delicious like caramel, because you recognize yourself as this glorious, like yummy, sweet, delicious lived experience, versus this, like you say, a very sanitized version of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a human, what it is to be Venusian. And yeah, and like I talk in the introduction about like it's been used very cleverly as a technique to sell us stuff, like say, oh, be more beautiful, be more Venusian. It's like, using all of that kind of talk. And then like you say about in astrology, it makes so much of it. I speak to that too around the Western astrology. It's just not, for me, I'm like, it's a great place to start, right? It's a great place to start, but it needs a rewrite, people. It needs a rewrite.
Yeah, it needs a rewrite for sure. And it's like Venus herself is telling us, I am the witch. And in astro with the pentagram and the rose, and I am the witch, and I am the heart, and I am the she power in the chart. And with that, I find that in astrology, a lot of people associate the witch with Black Moon Lilith or with
Mm.
Lilith. And it's like Lilith is this beautiful figure and this and that, but it makes our witchiness seem other. It makes our witchiness seem like some rebellious other part of us, when in reality, it's an inextricable part of ourselves. And to just be in our power, to live cyclically, to remember who we really are. And so Venus brings our witchiness into a more intimate relationship with us. I love the way that Venus makes a pentagram, a five-pointed rose. That couldn't be a more perfect symbol or pattern for her to make. And I remember being so blown away when I researched that myself, because something that will feel very familiar to people listening is this sense of rage deep down when we recognize how much has been freaking erased, demonized, how many lies we've been told about ourselves, our purpose, our power, our role, seeing ourselves in every single area of society being glazed over or just treated like smaller men. And so, how can we work with this rage within us? Because the more I find that I do this reclamation work, the more I realize how many lies have been told about our own power, the more I work through layers of such anger and frustration at how far we've deviated from what a beautiful collaboration we could be on a societal level with love. So, could you speak to that feeling of just rage?
And I could, right? And so there's this thing. So that's what I mean. When I wrote Witch, I was very rageful, because I was very much in that energy of like, this is bullshit. Like, this is not it. This is not okay. And so, and you'll find, like, as you are finding more of your own power, all the places that it has been taken from you, or you may have given it, but consciously or unconsciously, right? And that's when the rage starts to rise, because you're like, wait a minute, And that's why I feel, I mean, and so that's why my body of work has moved the way it has, literally and figuratively. My own body has come into a place of love. So it's harder for me to access that rage now, I'll be honest. And so we're all at different stages because of that, for that reason, so that there are still some of us that are holding that rage, so that while others of us are working on the love part, we are still able to see that reflection, right? So we're still able to see that, and we can hold, like we talked about earlier, we can hold both, right? We're getting stretchy with the capacity. But as now, as I'm working through like self-sorcery, it's like, oh, I've got no interest in staying in anger at the patriarchy. That makes no sense. It's crumbling. I'm watching it burn, right? It's uncomfortable. Of course it is, like you said earlier. And don't think that they're not going to use the most like manipulative, uncomfortable tools and techniques to kind of really try and hold on to those last death grips, right? And we've got to come into our power. We've got to recognize that, yes, there is rage, there is anger at that. And the more powerful you remember love is, and that can sound so twee, and I'm very much not that, right? But when we remember love at its core, which is fierce Ma, where she's able to, in the darkness, alchemize that rage and turn it into love. That's when we, in that Venus cycle, when we come into the underworld, we're able to meet Ma of the dark matter, because there, what matters is whatever's there is what matters, versus like you've let go of the story, right? So all we care about is what matters, and what matters to us in that moment, and that is love. And so she doesn't stroke our head, and she doesn't come and sing us a lullaby. That's not her love. It's fierce love. But you better believe it's supportive. You better believe she's got your back. You better believe she is gonna like kick your ass to make sure you show up in the most beautiful, profound, powerful way. And so then when we move into our power, we are serving, because we're so full. We're so full. There's so much love that the rage is still there, but we're able to alchemize it. We're able to use it. We're not powerless to the rage. We're not just in anger at like all of the ways in which like our voices have been stolen, silenced, burned, the way that we've been stolen, silenced, and burned as women, right? We can, like, that's what I'm saying. The recognition will still be there. We'll still hold that code, but we also hold the code of what to do with it. We also hold the code of how to alchemize it, to turn it into our power, to use it for good, for service. And when I say good, I don't mean good girl. I don't mean like to be pleasing to people. Far from it. That's when we can call the Lilith energy in. That's when we can say, yeah, we are going to be rebellious. And rebellious looks like love. Like it shouldn't, but in this current society, it does. Rebellion does look like love, like I say, the audacious acts of choosing love, of choosing ourselves, of filling ourselves up, of being women that are full of it. Like, what else am I going to be full of? Like, why is that a bad thing? Like to fill up on like to nourish ourselves and satiate ourselves, so we can be of service, so we can show up in our fullest selves. Like I see that for me is how we work with the rage. I'm not saying ignore it. Of course I'm not. Like I said before, it's like we witness it, we shine a light on it, and we go, okay, well, that's where my power is. Because we're going to take those stories, we're going to rewrite them, we're going to respell, we're going to retell, and we're going to do it a different way.
Yes, there's so much of what you just said that I want to talk about. And I want to start with, I resonate with what you said a lot, because I think that uncomfortable emotions like rage are messengers speaking to the aspects of self that need more love, power, and healing. And so if you're feeling so much rage coming up, like I did in the beginning, there is this messenger there of it's time to connect more with your inner warrior. It's time to find your bravery. It's time to move forward in ways that feel like they honor yourself instead of rooted in self-betrayal. And so let that holy rage, feel it, listen to it as a messenger, and let it invoke and awake an ancient part of you that is the warrior aspect of the goddess. And let that push you forward with bravery and aligned action with power. And so that rage is going to be less felt when we're in a place where we feel like we're honoring our heart and we're living in alignment and we've done a lot of our healing work, and that we are feeling, like we are in a good place, I guess. And so if that rage is coming up, it's basically saying something's out of alignment. This dormant feeling that you've been pushing down for so long is trying to get your attention. That's not a bad thing. Let it fuel you, let it give you the bravery, sit with it, and then say, okay, I hear you. Thank you for the message, but it's not for my highest and best to sit in rage all the time. I got the message that it's giving me, and now I'm going to move forward with a new powerful choice. And I also really loved when you said rebellion looks like love. That just hit me on such a deep level when you said that, because it's so true in today's society that is so much about greed and, individualism and all of these things. To live in a higher consciousness of love is a rebellious act. It's something that's not encouraged. We're meant to be these consumers that are wounded, always trying to fill a hole. And it is rebellious to say, what would love do in this moment, and choose that. And so I loved when you said that, because often people who are rebellious or go outside of society are meant to look to be shamed or otherized, when in reality they were just here to birth a new reality.
Facts. Felt facts. That's sort of
Yes.
on that one. It's the truth. It's the absolute truth. I feel like that's all and everything there is to do. And I just love when you're talking about the warrior. It's like, that's why the Venus cycle is so beautiful, right? Because they're on that descent, on that time when Venus is leaving the sky and coming down and in. It's almost like she's that warrior, because she's like she's fiercely getting rid of all of that, all the things that she witnesses as rage. And then, so I look at that as like the Joan of Arc phase, right? And then there's this Mary Magdalene phase as we rise out of that, like knowing, like it's deep wisdom knowing now. And that's all I mean, is like, it's not that, and we don't stay in all of those places. So I'm not saying I don't feel rage, because I absolutely do. And I'm human, right? So we're all human too. Like, so there's all these great ideas of like living in this higher kind of vibration of love all the time. Well, I also live in this world, and I have to navigate this world. And that's part of our magic as specifically as women, I think, is our ability to be able to recognize these phases and places and spaces that we're in, and work with the energy of that phase at that time. So you can work with the alchemy of rage, and then when you're not in that phase, because like, we don't need to build our forever home in the dark. Like, we love the dark because we're Scorpios, right? I'm very comfortable there. I'm also aware that like that makes it a little bit harder for me to let the light in. So I have to work a little bit harder when I'm in that phase of wanting to, like, I have to get a lot more stretchier around light than I do around dark. Whereas a lot of people might have might be the opposite. And that's why we understand and map and track our relationship with cyclic nature, whether that's our menstrual cycle, whether that's with the moon, whether that's using the planets. It's to recognize that there's a season for all the things, and that when we're in that season, work with the seasonal wisdom versus working against it and thinking, oh shit, I'm feeling rage and I should be feeling like positive and I should be feeling light. And it's like, well, no, it's cool to feel it, like you say, recognize it, and then we work out what we're going to do with it. Versus, like, we're not building home here, though. We're not building a home here.
Yes, that's such an important distinction. And I liked what you said about, yeah, I'm here living on planet Earth and I'm a human. And no matter if you're in a higher consciousness or not, you will get triggered, you will feel things. But I think the distinction that we're speaking to here is that we don't let it control us. We recognize it as a messenger emotion. We recognize it as a chapter of a place to navigate with deeper information for us, helping us come into deeper alignment, but we're not letting it consume us, and we're not finding victim narratives within it. So I think that's a really powerful distinction. And just as a woman in the United States of America, they're trying to take our reproductive rights away. We have a former president running again who says grab him by the pussy as if that's okay, and he still got elected. And I was actually sexually abused in that exact way when I was 21, and to watch a president get elected after saying that so cavalierly was interesting. So I'm not saying I don't feel rage, and I'm not saying I don't get triggered by what's happening, but just like Lisa's saying, let that move you into aligned action to make a difference. Don't let it consume you in a way that's a form of self-sabotage.
Beautifully said. Love that.
Yes. And so I know in Self Sorceress, you talk about womb breaths. I believe it's in that book. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit for anybody who isn't familiar with this idea of breathing into our womb, creating more space there to start to feel connected with the wisdom from our womb.
Yeah, I think I write about it in a lot of books too.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's so simple and yet it's so profound that I always wanted, I mean, I'm happy to repeat myself. It's no drama for me at all. And it's so simple that people want to make womb breathing complicated. Like they want to make a lot of spirituality complicated, and literally all we're ever doing is just finding a way home. Like, so for me it's through the breath, and it would you like me to just demonstrate? Would that be easier? Like just to talk you
Sure.
through it? Yeah. Well, it's an in breath, in through the nose. It's deep. You feel it in your throat, you feel it in your heart. You let that breath keep moving and moving down through our body, and you let it land on, like, in your womb space, and you let that breath, and you hold it there, and you let it be there, and then you release it. You let it come back up all the way through your belly, through your heart, through your throat, and out through your mouth. Yes, that's the breath. I get it, right? It is that simple. And yet it's the intentionality that we set. It's to connect with the womb space. It's to bring breath and aliveness and energetic, like it's to wake it up so we can have a conversation with her. It's almost to be like, so that we're in conversation with her. When we breathe into her, we're acknowledging her. And for many of us, that acknowledgement is a long time coming, right? And again, there's no sticks to beat ourselves with regarding that. It's not a thing to worry about. It's just like, for some of us, we've been disconnected. And so actually that's why the act of breath is so beautiful, that we bring it in, and it's in through the nose, it's down through the body, it's with intention to meet ourselves at our womb space. And then it's to hold it there. To hold it, to practice holding energetics in our womb space, and then releasing it through the mouth. And honestly, it's a very beautiful practice, and I do it daily. And it's just a gorgeous way to come into our body, to be awake with her, to be in conversation with her. And sometimes you'll hear nothing. Right? Sometimes she won't speak to you. And that's what I say about being in connectivity with the divine. Like, some people get really annoyed that I'm like, well, I'm talking to her. I'm doing everything that I'm told to do in order to connect to her. Sometimes she just wants you to be silent. Sometimes she just wants you to be in the not known. She wants you to meet your edges, because for some of us, that's really uncomfortable to be in silence. It's really uncomfortable to have to listen versus want to fill that space with noise. And like I used to be very much about self-medicating that, because I didn't want to be with my own self. So I would eat noisy food, what I call noisy food, literally, like to make noise so that I didn't have to hear what my body was, what you've been talking about in terms of our body as a messenger, right? I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear it. And yet actually, sometimes that's why those silent spaces are there. So we have to get really okay. Like, we have to get okay with the dark. We have to get okay with the silence, because it's when we meet those edges, when we get that rub, which is very uncomfortable. And it's meant to be. That's the point. We're meant to get uncomfortable so that we create the pearl, so that we create the wisdom, so that we create the knowledge, and so that we can be then with the experience for longer. And then, like I say, she may come in a voice, she may come in sensations, she may come in felt knowing. And like I say, they're not always words for any of the feminine experiences. We always want to try and put words on them, like to tell each other what they are. And actually, that's why I always find it so very difficult to do podcasts and things. And I really have struggled in the past because there's not always words for the felt experience, especially words and language regarding women coming into connectivity with that Alexandrian knowledge, with that their body as that mystery school. And so we kind of try and put a word, and in self sorcery I was talking about how we try and capture ideas, and it's literally a capture of the feminine ideas, and like she's not to be captured, she's not to be tamed, she's to be felt and experienced. And so I can write a book, and I hope that that book is languaged and coded with felt experience, so that when you open it and you read it, or you hear me read it to you, like there's something that unlocks and unfolds in terms of your own knowing. But ultimately, they're just my words. They're just my experience of what it is to be in connectivity with this energy, with this power, with this. And then you'll find your way, and you'll do it in your way. And some of us are mad articulate. It's why you've got, why you've got a podcast, right? Because, there's an articulation to how you can share that wisdom. And then for some of us, like me, it's not so easy. It's like not so easy in this throat of mine. Because some of us do carry, and we will experience like carrying the wounds of the witches that have gone before us, of the women that have gone before us, who have been silenced. And so when someone can, like for me, like you having this podcast, having this space to share, it's like so glorious for me to hear you speak the magic that we experience in such a beautiful, articulate way. And that's why we give each other, like we all each have, like we said earlier, like the threads. And we all support each other in those threads.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much. And I think you should give yourself more credit, because you're spitting facts at us. And I love hearing everything you say. And even though they're quote unquote your words, the part of you that is she is writing them. And that is why the part of us that is she feels them on a deep level, and it moves us and it changes us. And that's so powerful. And it's true. These concepts are truly ineffable. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, trying to articulate what it feels like to be in co-creation with spirit, source, she, is worth, I don't know, all the words in the entire world in a quantum way, all being spoken at once. It's impossible to capture. And so people like you writing these books, they create a ripple effect and a domino effect of so much healing in the world. And I'm just so, so grateful for your work. I truly am. And I also really liked what you were saying about being comfortable in the silence. And like you, I have no problem repeating myself. And I've said this quote many times on the podcast, but I'm quoting another amazing medium, Eileen Davies. And she says, silence is to the soul what food is to the body. And so many times we are only trying to connect with she, our womb, our angels, our guides, because we're in a place of desperation to hear one answer. And that is going to be ripe for your mind to come in and fill in the blank instead of actual intuitive connection. And so that ability to sit in the silence and sit in the unknown is the reason I said the best psychics and mediums are comfortable in the unknown, because our ego isn't trying to tell us what should be or fill in the blanks. And so being able to just sit in the presence of the goddess and just sit with her might be all the healing you need, all of the energy you need to move forward in a new transformed way. Maybe it has nothing to do about a message coming through in the way you think it quote unquote should. And just sitting with her, and like we said in the very beginning, sometimes the best messages surprise you a little bit. And sometimes even just walking out of that container in a little bit of a lighter way is the message that you needed or the medicine you needed that day. And so I think creating sacred container is our job. Letting source fill in that container is their job. Don't try to do their job for them.
I love that.
Yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, so in self-sorcery, I believe it's self-sorcery, and I'm mixing things up, and I'm such a bad reader sometimes because I go out of order and I kind of like feel intuitively what page I want to go to, and I like read right before bed like one page and then fall asleep and I forget where I read it. And so but I can't remember which book it's in, but you talk about castor oil packs as something that's really healing. And I wanted to talk about this with you because it's something I see a lot on TikTok, and I myself am healing PCOS, and I just never know how much to trust online. And I trust you so much. So I'm just scared, like, if I put on castor oil packs, am I going to explode? Like, what's going to happen? And I'm wondering if you can speak to that for those of us out there with period pain.
Well, I don't know about TikTok because that is not for me, but I understand that I do understand that it's much spoken about. And that's the thing with, again, so much of this magic and medicine, right? People want to share. Of course they do. They're like, I found this thing. It's awesome. And then, but there's no backup to it, right? All I can say is, and I do it really old-fashioned way, but it's like towel, castor oil, like laden, wrap it around me. I literally sometimes put a little bit of cling film around just to hold it in place. There's all sorts of lovely things now. It was in Love Your Lady Landscape, so it's like an older one. Yeah, like ages and ages ago. But now they've come up with all sorts of lovely things you can buy that are like they're much more prettier, and you can wash them and you can do all the things with them. But ultimately, and for me, then I would just put a hot water bottle on top of it. It's one of the most powerful medicines, I think. Look, if we've got period pains, again, it's our body giving us a message, right? And for me, our period pains are some of the most distinct ones, because it will be information that, and it is information and it is wisdom. It's both, right? But it's in terms of a period, but it'll generally be, what are you pushing down, or what has been pushed down? Not necessarily you. I don't want you to have to take the blame for all of this, right? But it's almost like what. For me, when with endometriosis and with PCOS having both, it was like the more psycho-spiritual element of that was that I wasn't speaking out about my magic and my power. I was literally pushing my magic and power down so hard into that space because I didn't want to express it and share it, that actually that was expressing itself through pain. And that's lineages. That's not just me. That's me then having to do a lot of lineage work because my whole family are secretive. Like, so I start the call with me talking about being a secretive Scorpio, but actually it's like there's a whole lineage that have gone before me, and I totally get it. I totally get why they didn't want to share their magic and their power. It wasn't safe for them to. Like, we can talk about being safe, but unless we can practice the fierce discernment to recognize what's safe for us, because I say this a lot regarding our magic, and I think it's true for specifically if you're experiencing period pain, is that if we're not discerning with our magic, because not everyone gets to access it. Like, we talk about, like, oh, we want to be supportive, we want to help people, yeah, of course, but not everyone gets access to your magic. You know, it's like it's practicing this fierce discernment around, okay, is it safe for me to share this here? Is it safe for me to share? Do I feel supported here to share this? And that's what I mean when I'm talking to the kind of suppression of magic, is I've had to really then get used to going like, okay, the safety comes from knowing myself, from trusting myself, like you say earlier, from not abandoning myself, because I'll happily walk out of a room if I don't feel cool in it. Like, if I've shown up somewhere and someone's and like I'm not being seen in the way that I've wanted to be seen and the way that I want to show up, if I'm not being honored or revered in the way that I honor and revere myself now, I will walk out. That's no worries to me. So therefore, the pain is much less, because we're starting to like you were saying earlier about honoring the goddess. It's like when we recognize us as the goddess, when we recognize ourselves as she, when we recognize when we honor ourselves the way we honor the goddess and that part of us, then there's no room you'll stay in if you're not being honored. There's no room, there's no way, there's no conversation you'll stay in if you're not being nourished. Like, if it's like we said, sometimes if you're a Scorpio, you'll bore me if you're going to talk small talk. And before, there'd have been like this real pleasing in me that would have wanted to like please and appease someone. So I'll just sit there and listen, but I'll be somewhere else. Like, I ain't got time for that. No, none of us have got time for that. Like, none of us have got time for that, actually. So it's the trusting of ourselves. And so long-winded story. Castor oil's great, but ultimately, for the most part, if there is period pain, it's because we're ignoring or pushing down, I feel, magic and power. But like, it might not necessarily be you. It might be lineage work that's coming up and through.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. So I so agree that period pain is this invitation to remember our power and the divine feminine within us. Like we've said, that has been demonized and sanitized and forgotten. And I identify with that so, so much. And it brings me to this feeling that as a woman, I feel, but also I feel is a universal experience to some extent, which is feeling like we need a reason. Feeling like we need a reason to say, I want to leave. I don't feel good here. I don't like this job. And it's like we start to play, and this is how you know you have a crown chakra block. When you start to play judge and jury in your head over your higher wisdom of your heart. Who are you debating? You're debating the part of you that is your higher self. And so I find that it's like, oh, I want to break up with him, but I don't have a good enough reason. Your reason is that that's how you feel and you don't feel fully lit up, and that's okay. We're allowed to leave things that are not 100% right, even if they're 99% right, because that's how we feel. So I loved what you said about if you walk into a room and you're not feeling it, you'll leave. Because that is amazing. And I resonate with that so, so much. And that builds trust. Your body can trust you. It can relax a little bit more when you start to honor what it asks for. And when you're in your full power and remember the part of you that is that goddess energy, your body can relax. And I think that's part of the reason the period pain goes away is because we hold so much in. And for me, it felt very unsafe in my body to disagree. To disagree with someone felt so unsafe. And long story short, I have kind of a tough relationship with a family member, a couple family members that I'm navigating. And the first time I stuck up to a family member that I had a hard time with and refused to walk on eggshells with and spoke my truth and refused to always be the kind of quote bigger person, the next period that came had no pain. And so that was just such a, and it was on the summer solstice. I was like vibing. So it's so true what you're saying. And our body is always speaking to us. And I just think that that is so, so, so beautiful. So thank you so much for that perspective. And I just want to say before I ask you where everyone can find you that truly when I read your book, Witch, it was an awakening for me. It truly is a book that changed my life. And I always saw you as like my cool Scorpio older sister that I never met. And I was like, I relate to her so much because the endo and the PCOS, I relate to that. The Scorpio, I relate to that. There's a lot with you that just feels like such soul recognition and resonance. And I'm just endlessly grateful for the magic that you've poured into the world. And I'm so glad that you did the work to share your magic because it definitely changed my life. And I know this interview will help so many people too.
Oh, stop it. I'll cry. That's beautiful. And honestly, I am receiving it and I am grateful. And I think it's so important that when that happens, like I want to be your sister. Now we have met and now this is beautiful, right? I haven't got any brothers or sisters. I'll take all the sisters. So it's like, but I think it's really important for us to support each other in that way. Look, not every woman's going to like every woman. I get it, right? But we've got to support each other to have this voice. We've got to support women that are having voices and sharing. And however they're choosing to do that in the world, we have to allow that to be, that's part of our power is the recognition and the support of that. So thank you for supporting my work. It's an honor to be here. I hope that the people listening love it as well. Like, and yes, and let's just keep sharing in all the ways, because we've all got the medicine. And what you were just saying about the body, remembering that our body is a mystery school, is the most Venusian vessel, like we're the most Venusian vessel, and this is a mystery school, and we're getting to unravel it and then reveal it and write a different story, and that just makes me so excited. So I love meeting people that are getting it and doing it as well.
Yes, and your book is going to help us shift our gaze from being critical of our body to remembering the magic of our body. And that's the whole point of this podcast is to take an hour out of our busy day and remember the magic in the world and expand our idea of what that can look like. So how can everyone find you? Where can they pre-order the book? Where can they connect with you?
So I'm at thesassyshe.com. So it's thesassyshe.com. And on Instagram, because I do Instagram, but that TikTok is not for me. I'm far too old for that. But like the Instagram is at Sassy Lisa Lister.
Awesome. Amazing. We will have that in the show notes. And Lisa, I
Thank
hope to have you
you.
back one day because this was amazing.
Anytime, anytime. Thank you. Thank you for making it so pleasurable.
My absolute pleasure as well. Thank you so, so much. Welcome to Sitting with Spirit, my loves. I am just basking in all of the fiery, excited, lit up energy that interview just sent straight through my body. And I just wanted to say too, something I forgot to say when Lisa was talking, because she made so many good points in a row that I was like beside myself with which deciding like where I wanted to go next. But when she was talking about womb breathing, I just had this image of the messages, the feelings, the whatever our womb space, the magic carried in our womb space, when we breathe into it, it's like, and then we send the breath back up. It's like traveling, those things traveling up through our solar plexus, our heart, back to our throat and out. So it's like this two-part process that we get to receive and release. And it's really cool how it, like she said, gives more movement and life and energy to that part of the body. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And it really struck me. So I hope that everyone who, whether you have a womb or not, can practice breathing into that sacral chakra part of ourselves, because it's truly a power source of where we create for all of us. So I'm going to transition into the messages from Spirit. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Happy to have you. This is a segment where I tune in, literally sit with Spirit, as well as our angels and guides, and give the messages for the collective. Sometimes I do bring through past loved ones, as a lot of people listen to this podcast. Don't have to make everything fit, but know that Spirit works together to give specific sets of evidence that will resonate with more than one person. And if some of it resonates, but not all of it, that's okay. It's basically just a wink from your past loved ones in Spirit. Like, look at this synchronicity. We're here with you too. So the first thing I got was from our angels. So I started off speaking to our angels, and then I did bring through a male past loved one who I'll speak about in a second. But I want to start with the angel messages this week. And one of the first angel messages is when we are in a place of feeling afraid to be loud, bold, authentic, and unapologetic, we block ourselves from the kind of success that we're looking for. So let me give you an example. So if you're really in your head, like say, for example, I talked about on the podcast that it felt so unsafe for me to disagree. And that's because it's like, I want people to agree with me because that feels safe to me. And that shows me that they understand what I'm saying and I feel heard and I feel smart, or whatever those things are. And so when we're in a state where it's like, I feel unsafe to disagree with people or to not be liked, we shape shift to please everyone else, and then we dilute our authentic expression. We already know that, but on the energetic standpoint, how that blocks us from manifestation, creation, and success on a larger scale is that we're subconsciously telling the universe, I don't feel safe to be seen at a bigger level. I don't feel safe to be successful, because there's going to be people that don't like you. There's going to be people that disagree with you. There's going to be people that say mean things. And if we on the micro are so uncomfortable with that and give our power away to that dynamic, it stops us from being able to be received in a bigger way, because it's like, copy that, we'll shield you, we'll protect you. And part of that is keeping you small. And I'm sharing this message because it's a personal one that I've been getting recently too, as I've been working on feeling safe to disagree, especially with certain family members. I keep like putting passive aggressive comments of like different family members I'm like having trouble with. I love my family. I'm going to have to work on that. So this is really important because I was on the couch and I was replaying this disagreement and I felt so unsafe to disagree. And I finally made this choice of like working through this, really coming into my power, trusting, feeling safe that, okay, not everybody's going to like me. And that really goes back to me being bullied as a kid and so much to unpack about that. But I was like, okay, not everybody's going to like me. Not everybody's going to agree with me. And I mean, there's a certain level of healing that it takes to even have a podcast and talk about this kind of stuff so openly. And I've been on my own journey with that. But now I feel like I'm at this next level of like, it's safe to be in my authentic truth. And after I made that full body resonance, my angels were like, yeah, and that allows us to sort of blow you up more. It allows us to get you out there to more people because you feel safe in your body and you're opening up to that now. And the moment I made that shift, the day I made that shift, like a cool synchronicity and opportunity opened up for me that could lead to reaching more people. So I feel like it's so directly linked, and we might not realize that we're calling in success on a large scale, a book deal, a movie, or whatever it is. But then the subconscious ways that we don't feel safe to be disagreed with or, show up authentically can be sabotaging that experience because we, on a subconscious level, don't feel safe to step into those shoes. So that's the first message. And it's so sneaky. It's so sneaky trying to control us that way. And so just shine a light on that and reflect on that and just see where you might be keeping yourself in an uncomfortable comfort zone, because on a subconscious level, the universe is like, okay, great. We won't put anybody in her path that disagrees with her. So the next message that I got was such a cool image from our angels and guides. And like I always say, the interview always primes my consciousness for the messages that want to come through next that really wrap up nicely with the episode. And I know I've shared before about seeing this witch's hat made of pure turquoise light. But this time, and this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this, I saw a witch's hat made out of all of these different types of clay from different types of places in the world. Red clay, yellow clay, like all of these different types of clay swirling together from different lands, different sacred sites to form this witch's hat. And it felt like a witch's hat that when you put it on your head was like an exhale. It just felt like a reclamation. It felt so grounding. Whereas a lot of the witch's hat meditations that I do sort of shoot our energy up and our consciousness up to connect with the divine and our higher self. This witch's hat was directing us. It was an earth element witch's hat. It was directing us to the ground, to our roots, to just this more embodied, slow magic that is the other part of the duality. Like, I connect so much as a witch who is an oracle and who works with the stars and who talks to the spirit world. But there's also so much juiciness and magic, like Lisa said, in the mystery school of our body and the magic of the earth and the slowing down in the womb and the silence. And that's what this witch's hat felt like it was attuning our energy to collectively. And when I get symbols like this, it's an invitation for you to meditate on that symbol as a energetic code that will already prime your consciousness for that energy. So when I talk about different witches' hats or symbols, I invite you to just think about that energy and invite you to see where that takes you. And so our angel said the reason that this witch's hat is made of clay is because it's time to shape a new consciousness. And so like clay, the witch's hat is helping us mold ourselves into this new consciousness of deeper love, power, and rootedness. And it just was this like full body exhale, relaxing feeling when I felt into this energy. And with that, I saw the symbol of a baby. And when I see a baby as a symbol, it can, yes, mean an actual baby. but more often it's us going through a rebirth moment. And that is why this witch's hat was made of clay, because it's time to shape and mold a new version of self that this witch's hat is helping us to do. And so a lot of people are going through this moment now of crossroads, of rebirth, of a new version of self. And with that, I saw the Aries symbol. And that doesn't mean you have to be an Aries. They speak to me archetypally because I'm an astrologer. And Aries is initiation. It's bravery. It's following that spark of passion and joy and interest and curiosity. It's the fool in the tarot that jumps off the cliff, not knowing what's on the other side and not caring, just taking the leap of faith. And that's the feeling that I get. It's like the safety. It takes those deep healed roots to find the safety to grow to the sky and to take those leaps of faith. And that's why these messages are coming together, because until we feel rooted and grounded and safe in ourselves, it will be really hard to find the bravery to take those leaps of faith and to jump into the unknown. And so we are in this moment of newness, rebirth, initiation, trying on a new version of self for size. And our angels and guides are celebrating that and cheering us on, as are all of our ancestors who came before us, who hold that witchy wisdom. And so now I want to go to the spirit that I connected with. So I connected with a father energy on the other side, and I did feel like he struggled with memory loss towards the end. And because of that, I was feeling this like not getting to say goodbye. But with that, I also got this feeling of, even when he had his full memory, he wasn't the best communicator. He wasn't the best at articulating himself. He felt kind of like a hard time connecting. I felt a lot of pain on his chest, and it made me feel like he either passed from a heart attack or had something with his chest or heart area that was really being lit up. And then I was seeing boxing gloves and like dumbbells, and it made me feel like there might be a connection to boxing, working out a lot, being really physically fit with him when he was here. But I felt like the boxing gloves were symbolic of two different things. Like, yes, the actual boxing, but I also felt a kind of combativeness in his nature. And I felt this sense of like, it's sort of my way or the highway, or I'm so like strong on my views, and like if you don't agree with me, like I'm just going to close up. And so he came in with his mom, and I feel like some of his sort of wounding and things like that started in his dynamic with his mom, because she felt very similar energetically. And basically, oh, and I also saw a J name associated with him. So I felt like there was something with the letter J with his name. And so the message that I get here is that he, as a father, didn't know what to do with a daughter who was such a sensitive feeler, who needed a completely different, him to show up a completely different way. And there's an apology there from him of saying, I'm so sorry that I missed the mark. I couldn't even be there for my own emotions. I learned what feminine energy was from my mom, who had her own sort of difficult dynamic with me. And I just did not know what to do with you, and how to love you and how to show up for you. And I'm very sorry that I couldn't be there in the way you needed me to. And so there's an apology with this spirit, with this father energy. And the feeling that I get too is that you're choosing a new path. You're breaking an ancestral cycle, and he's proud of you, and that he can support you more on the other side than he could here. And he shows me a sunrise. And that is my symbol for like a new dawn, a new day, after we've kind of gone through a dark time, the light coming back. And so the feeling that I get with him is that there's a lot of grief and there was a lot of pain in your relationship with him. It felt a little bit strained. And I just get the feeling that he wasn't one that invited debate or deeper discussions. It just felt like there was a lot of pain and tension between both of you. And he carried a lot of his own wounding deep in his heart without knowing what to do with it. And so again, there's just this feeling here of, I'm really sorry I didn't know how to love you. I love you so much. I do feel like there's another sister energy with this person. He's talking about having more than one girl and not knowing what to do with them. So the feeling that I get here is like, he's showing this pathway. And I feel like he had an invitation to this pathway and he ran from it, but you're accepting the call to the pathway, and that he can walk that pathway with you just in spirit, and that he's really proud of you. And so that's the message here today, is that sometimes our parents, with their own trauma and their own limited toolbox, don't know what to do with us when we demand a higher consciousness of them. And because of that, they can tell us we're wrong, don't trust your feelings, stay in line. And they can try to just sort of push us down as a reflection of their own pain. And that's the apology here today. And actually, that resistance in you, that sensitivity, is the greatest gift that your bloodline needed. So thank you for that, and continue to nurture that, because that's your superpower. So much love to you all today. Claire, is there anything you want to add?
I just am buzzing from this episode, and I feel like it was such an invitation for us all to connect to our power and connect to the power of our bodies and step more fully into that. And I'm really excited to meditate with that witch's hat image and see what comes up.
Yes. When they were like, it's made of clay because it's time to reshape your consciousness, I was like, wow, mic drop. I love, and that's exactly what I mean by some of the best messages are the ones that surprise us. Like when I heard that, I was like, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah, so awesome. This was such an amazing episode. I know it will resonate with you all as well. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and thank you so much for being here.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we will send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 111 5-star reviews.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.